miles and see no human beings. But in those miles of country lurk, it seems, thousands of men, planning against each other perpetually some new device of death. Never showing themselves, they launch at each other bullet, bomb, aerial torpedo and shell.
Unlike previous wars, the fighting on the Western Front was unceasing. Somewhere down the line there was always a gun firing, a man falling. But for the troops of both sides, life was not always unrelenting warfare. During 1916, the average British soldier spent 100 days at the front. For the remainder, he was in reserve, on work detail, resting, or on leave. And over the 500-mile front, some sectors were easier than others. Even busy ones had their lulls. One day, British General Lord Edward Gleichen visited the front line.
When going round the trenches, I asked a man whether he had had any shots at the Germans. He responded that there was an elderly gentleman with a bald head and long beard who often showed himself over the parapet. Well, why didn't you shoot him? Shoot him? Said the man. Why, Lord bless you, sir, he's never done me no harm. A shocking example of live and let live.
Live and let live was a pervasive phenomenon on both sides of accommodation with the enemy. It arose because in quiet times and in quiet lines, men were learning to adapt to war and to adapt war to them.
We sometimes got out of the trench into the tall grass behind, which the sun had dried, and enjoyed a warm indolence with a book. Not infantry training, I think. The war seemed to have forgotten us in that placid sector.
Quand les Gotha viennent sur Paris, puis à la CAF me mettent à l'abri, je retrouve là, en pyjama, un tas de gens assis sur des pliants, que l'on figure dans un angle obscur, puis dernièrement un couple étonnant, de beaux vieux bourgeois, madame aux abois, criait s'appelait toi. Tiens-moi contre toi, tiens-toi contre moi, tiens-moi bien, 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 dis mon Adrien, écoute que j'ai peur, ma puce sur mon cœur, je vais vous ouvrir de frayeur.
I'm with officers and sergeants who are great fun. There's lots of schnapps and wine, and every day we get so drunk we forget whether we're at war or in Civvy Street.
Ça leur suffit le lendemain, nos deux bourgeois avaient pris le train, d'un cœur léger.
In my unit, there was a piano actually in the trench in the front line, and we had many a good sing-song.
I feel great. I have never lived so well, and probably never will again. I have just joined our sports club. This evening someone got a football. Now we can play football, racing, long jump. Chocolate is the prize, donated by our platoon commander.
Life in this sector is gloriously lazy. Weather is perfect. The enemy most peaceful. And there's little to do but lie on one's back and smoke, or write imaginative letters back home.
It would be child's play to shell the road behind the enemy's trenches, crowded as it was with ration wagons and water carts, into a blood-stained wilderness. But on the whole there is silence. After all, if you prevent your enemy from getting his rations, his remedy is simple. He will prevent you from drawing yours.
We often see the smoke of the Germans' mealtime fires ascending in blue-grey spirals. It is only common courtesy not to interrupt each other's meals with intermittent missiles of hate.
One day while our infantry was cooking, there was a shout from the enemy trench. Could he come and eat too? He was invited over. The Frenchman came and ate and made himself comfortable. And from then on, whenever the Frenchman noticed that food was ready in the German trenches, he came and joined in.
Sometimes an officer tried to stir his men into a little action. How about posting a sniper or lobbing over a grenade?
We received the following message tied to a stone from the German trenches opposite. We're going to send a 40-pounder. We've been ordered to do this, but we don't want to. It'll come this evening, and we'll blow a whistle first to warn you so that you have time to take cover. All happened as they said it would.
The sniper is a very necessary person. He serves to remind us that we are at war. Wherever a head or anything resembling a head shows itself, he fires. Were it not for his enthusiasm, both sides would be sitting upon their respective parapets, regarding each other with frank curiosity. And that would never do.
British Directive, March 1916. With trench warfare, there is an insidious tendency to lapse into a passive and lethargic attitude, against which officers of all ranks have to be on their guard, and the fostering of the offensive spirit calls for incessant attention.
Live and let live was dependent on the sector and the troops manning it. The Germans didn't like facing the Highland regiments. The British couldn't get along with the Prussians. But some of the other Germans were fine.
The soldier Mike gave us some useful hints. It's the Saxons that's across the road, he said, pointing to the enemy lines, which were very silent. They're quiet fellas, the Saxons. They don't want to fight any more than we do. So there's a kind of understanding between us. Don't fire at us, and we'll not fire at you.
Live and let live did not occur where elite regiments were operating. They had their own ideas about getting at the enemy. Rare footage of a daylight raid by South African troops. The idea was to dominate no man's land. To say to the enemy, it's not no man's land, it's ours. Raids broke up trench routines, brought intelligence from prisoners, encouraged aggression. This, British High Command thought, was the cure for live and let live. Training sessions were organised using elaborate models of the target area. Raiding became compulsory for all regiments, and laggards were rooted out.
Higher ranks appeared in our midst. Chief of all, the Brigadier General, followed by an almost equally menacing staff captain. What was my name? I had not been round the company's wire. Why not? I was to go.
Reports of daring raids were duly submitted, but some at HQ, like Brigadier General Crozier, smelt a rat.
It became increasingly difficult as time went on to obtain correct reports from officers' patrols. It was my habit to order samples of German wire to be cut and brought back. Thus one would know that the German line had been visited.
At least one squad of reluctant raiders had an answer to that. They found a large coil of German barbed wire in no man's land and just snipped bits off, sending them in with bogus reports.
That went on every night. And the old man never knew we had a coil of jerry wire on our side.
Many, though, entered the spirit, proudly displaying their trophies. Raiding and shelling helped put the war back into the gaps between battles. One night in May 1916, Siegfried Sassoon joined a raiding party into no man's land.
The raiders vanished into the darkness on all fours. I crawled out after them. Shells started to fire. News came back. O'Brien says it's a washout. They can't get through the wire. A bomb burst. Then a concentration of angry flashes. Wounded men were crawling back. Among them a grey-haired lance corporal who'd had one of his feet almost blown off. Thank God for this. I've been waiting 18 months for it, and now I can go home.
Sassoon's raid was launched from these trenches. The objective? This ridge. But it all went badly wrong.
I went to look for O'Brien, groping my way along the edge of a crater. Bullets hit the water near me. There I discovered him. He moaned. He'd been hit several times. The stretcher bearer bent over him, then straightened. In a surprising gesture, he took off his helmet. O'Brien had been one of the best men in our company.
Shelling was the biggest killer of the war. Live and Let Live continued on and off, but the loss of comrades made it increasingly difficult to sustain.
Speaking for my companions and myself, I can categorically state that we were in no mood for any joviality with Jerry. We hated his guts. We were bent on his destruction at each and every opportunity. Our greatest wish was to be granted an enemy target worthy of our Vickers machine gun.
We were under shell fire for 8 hours. It was like a dream. Some of the men looked quite insane after the charge. As we entered the German trenches, a great number came out asking for mercy. Needless to say, they were shot right off. The Royal Scots took about 300 prisoners and immediately shot the whole lot.
There were many cases on both sides of prisoners being killed after surrender. Such atrocities fueled hatred further. But many prisoners were captured. They provided excellent opportunities for propaganda. British newsreel film of German POWs was used to convince audiences back home that Britain was gaining the upper hand. By the end of the war, there were nearly 9 million prisoners in total, and captivity was not their only hardship.
It's already been 2 years since you were here last. and Mother Nature needs to fulfill her urges again. As you can't come and see me, I'm forced to go looking elsewhere. Don't think I'm joking, I'm serious. I don't care what you think of me, but you can't expect me to waste my youth like this. After all, I'm not made of wood, and what a person needs, a person must get. Please don't be cross with me, will you? Your ever-loving Thelma. Your sweet children send you lots of love.
Another German wife was careful to reassure her absent husband.
We've got a real slut in our house who's always got someone new with her. That bitch isn't good enough for such a decent man. The poor thing fights at the front, while she swans off to the cinema and the pub with the other fellas back home. Dearest man, please don't think evil thoughts, because there are also good women who are faithful to their men.
Letters from home were the soldier's lifeline.